Hello, my name is Miranda, and thank you for joining me for today in our Roots Replanted workshop, which is our Roots Replanted A Journey to New Beginnings workshop series that we are very excited to announce and produce to the community. So, this workshop series is about starting new, starting fresh, and just really being able to plant new seeds and allow yourself the grace to grow. All right, so I'll go ahead and pull up our presentation. If you have questions, please always feel free to drop it in the chat, leave us a comment, send us an email. We'll be sure to get back with you. So without further ado, let me go ahead and get this pulled up so that I can present. Okay. All right. So rebuilding starts with acknowledgement. And growth is a beautiful journey in which change is inevitable. So, again, thank you for joining us here today. Us, as in me, right? Thanks for joining me here today as we go into the workshop where we start to replant and build new. So, in this space, be yourself, ask questions, and don't hesitate because, like, I don't judge, boast, demean. Anything that we talk about in these webinars are going to stay here. So again, my name is Miranda Houston. I also go by Coach Mandy. I am a behavior interventionist for the local school district, a sound alchemist, a clinical trauma specialist. I'm a mother of four, and I'm a first generation entrepreneur. So I have had my fair share of trials. I own Ineffable Herbs, which is self care herbs and remedies for your optimum self. Our Kids Michigan chapter, which is mindfulness, morals, and management for youth who have had behavioral impairment. Holism Haus is about making holistic trauma recovery accessible, which is how you found this webinar today. And our Legacy Wear exclusive clothing, which is our urban clothing and merchandise with a purpose, where 15% of proceeds go towards youth participating in the Our Kids program. So I firmly believe that life is the best teacher. Our bodies are conditioned to experience, adapt, learn, and modify in real time. Like we don't we don't have to do that work. The body does it for us, right? And so I just want you all to remember that you are not what you went through. And I want to take some time to read a letter from the workbook. So this is my letter to you as we navigate this workbook together in this workshop series. So I invite you to step into my story, a story woven with struggle, resilience, and ultimately rebirth. Drifting through the fluctuations of life and the lessons we must learn to ascend, not solely for physical purposes, but spiritual as well. After all, religion does not determine what is right or what feels right. That would be morality. We have the leisure to nurture our lives or not, yet neither option is an easier choice. Each pathway has its own share of tribulations and requirements. So I challenge you to ponder which path will aid you to develop yourself further so you can grow, and which path will illuminate your ability to demonstrate sustainable growth and enlightenment by the seeds you produce. So why should I, or anyone else for that matter, consistently lean into false expectations appearing real? And that's fear. I used to ask myself, how the hell can I be free if I feel like a slave for my own life? How can I shake the labels and embrace the unknown when I don't even know what that looks like? Who or what can I depend on in this journey? And those were all thoughts that I have had in my dark past. I made it through grief, negative self worth, postpartum depression, domestic violence. In those circumstances, I endured made it easy to be stuck in a stressful cycle, in which we will learn as the limbic trauma loop and the emotional codependency loop, right? But my encouragement to you is to keep acknowledging these patterns. Keep learning when you feel activated, triggered, elevated, and you will be able to grow too. You will have a deeper understanding of yourself, and you will be able to maneuver, transmute, recover from some of the things that um, have set you back. So I used to reaffirm things that were put on me, like I'm a white black girl because I like sledding, I like playing instruments, I like soft rock, I like camping, and a host of other things. And all I heard growing up was that I liked white people things. So I started to hear that. And then when I started like sticking up for myself, it became, you better take that tone out your voice. You starting to smell yourself. When I was defending the fact that what I like is not a white thing, it is an activity. An activity should not be labeled as white or black. So those things as a young child has significant impacts on a child's development, which we will discuss later. But overall, I say that to say that I do what I do, and we are here for this Roots Replanted, a new journey to new beginnings, because I had to unbecome. So, unbecoming. So, as I entered the phase of unbecoming during my healing journey, I was unbecoming of who I was and what I was known as. I was unbecoming of my old thought processes, unbecoming of my old habits, unbecoming of my social circles, and unbecoming of transgenerational patterns. And if you notice there, I put social circles, right? Social is spelled this way to help people think about soul ties and how they are much more than the common through intimacy aspect that we know. It's generally your essence of being is interacting with others' essence of beings around you. So your spirit is interacting with someone else's spirit. And I want you to just start thinking about how in these spaces, these social circles, how are these affecting you? How are these people in social circles affecting you over time, right? How has maybe your presence or essence of being affected others? So the root of unbecoming is to stay in the process of becoming and becoming who you need to be, becoming who I needed to be in the purpose of betterment of myself, my family, spirituality, and my community. So I mentioned earlier in a post that I did on my Facebook socials, and I said, you must understand so that others can understand, right? And so when you have a understanding of something, you fully and thoroughly comprehend the mission, the purpose, the value, all of the intricate internal parts. You understand the assignment. So, for example, if you have a dream, right, and you go to try to explain that dream to people, most of the time, people are like, I get it, or I see what you're saying, or they'll try and help you interpret it. However, you are the one with the dream. And when you understand what the dream meant, what it was saying, who was in it, what they were doing, then you can now vocalize and express yourself so that others can understand. But I also say that because There is never anyone in this entire world that you should give more power than yourself. You cannot give someone more power than you give yourself. If you are, you at risk for disease. But that's a whole nother topic for another day. Okay. So understanding versus understanding is within. So please understand that who I'm asking you to become through completing this workbook is merely a reflection of the time that you've put into yourself. You are the accolade, and you may provide your own celebration if you feel so moved. But you just want to make sure that that celebration is sacred. As you're growing, celebrate that. Celebrate your wins, right? Um, we are all divinely connected to Source. And whichever way you interpret the connection, it can be described as a feeling or a logical view. Um, it can be described as a feeling um, or in a logical view. The fact is that we are we are all made of the same thing, right? And the only difference between you and I are the choices that we've made on our path. No trauma is greater than the biggest battle, and the biggest battle is ourselves, becoming ourselves, unbecoming our old selves, and completing these cycles every time we are faced with growth. And I like to view it like I have the ability to grow every day, right? Um, so if you have a copy of the workbook, please feel free to follow along. If not, I hope you'll join us at the next webinar series. Because in the meantime, this webinar and this book uh, serves as a place to just breathe and reflect and grow. So Roots Replanted is not about fixing what's broken. It's about nurturing the strength that's always been within you. So even when the world tried to convince you otherwise, this is your journey back to yourself, your home, and your truth. This is designed to meet you where you are. If you do have the workbook, it's versatile, just like every last one of us, right? And so you're able to adapt to your needs at the time, your pace at the time, and your vision for the future. So there's no right or wrong way to move through these pages, only the way that feels right and true for you. But they're both online and workbook based activities that you can do and scan as you get through the workbook. And like I mentioned earlier, if you have not signed up for our workshops, make sure you sign up for them, because that will ensure that you are equipped with all of the resources that you need to follow along and become your best self. All right. So, as a trauma specialist, it's my duty to ensure that everyone is regulated and able to move through these pages calmly. Okay? So, we are going to do a quick conscious connected breathing activity. So I want you to prepare your space, grab your incense, water, candle, whatever you like to set the tone. And we're going to do a few deep breaths together. This exercise is called the conscious connected breathing. And we'll take about 5 minutes to do that. So I'll give you 2 minutes to prep and 3 minutes for the activity. Now that we're back, I hope you're feeling regulated. I hope you're feeling better than you did before. As we move into this, I would like to talk about bringing up first, talking about trauma and the effects of trauma on our behavior. So, most of us are aware of the common effects of trauma. Trauma can significantly alter behavior, leading to increased anxiety, hypervigilance, struggle with trust, emotional regulation, increased chance of anxiety and depression. And we are going to expound on the trauma limbic loop, the polyvagal theory, and what the body endures during dysregulation. Excuse me. So, um, as we move through these pages, I wanted you to do that breathing activity because if you ever feel uncomfortable, I do ask that you just pause the video, take some time to breathe, take some time to recenter yourself. All right, so we'll talk about the trauma limbic loop. The trauma limbic loop, um, sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry, I missed the spot. All right, so I just want to go back, right, just a little bit and just read from here in our workbook um, about trauma's impact on health and behavior. So there are times in life where we find ourselves in unfavorable situations that can alter the trajectory of our lives. But that's only if we let it, right? We can be accountable for our actions, but we are not responsible for systematic oppression and misguided biases from others, right? That can also be considered transgenerational. So the way that we are primed in our youth displays in the way that we react as adults. The difference between response and reaction is that one is calculated and the other is instinctual. The human body is designed to respond to the environment. I used to like the Band-Aid example and the caveman example, where it's like, if you cut yourself, you don't need a Band-Aid. You don't need to tell yourself to heal. You don't have to think about healing. You don't have to put your hand over it and like actually send healing powers to it. It does it by itself, right? When you think about cavemen and you think about how they were hypervigilant when they were able to hear animals and prey from, miles away. When you think about that and you think about how far we've came from caveman days, obviously, the fact remains that our body is still going to try to survive. So our life experiences are a direct impact of our biochemical driven response. So this is why it is important to monitor your environment and your body consistently. Once you are faced with an external stimuli in the environment, your body will alert the brain, and the brain will produce hormones and chemicals to respond to the environment, which we'll learn about in the trauma limbic loop. When we operate with fear, uncertainty, and doubt, our body responds in the same loop. That is referred to as dysregulated. It's a process in the body that puts our brains in a catabolic state. So having resilience is a great marking point for healing, but it's not the finish line. Our brains need to rewire, which can take 2 weeks for children and upwards to 8 months for a fully grown adult. And that's just for one thing that we're trying to combat. Okay? All right. So with the trauma limbic loop, you see here the visuals from the workbook, right? So you have experience, stimuli, internal response, neuroception, repeated exposure, and how to interrupt the loop. But what I really want to start with is neuroception. Neuroception is essentially a neural state we are just in. It is consistently sending signals from the body about the environment. It's like a scan, right? So if you think about and I'm not sure if this is like real technology in a boat, but in the movies, when you are on a boat or a ship of some kind and they have all those circles of proximity and then they're traveling through and next thing you know, it's like sending out waves, right? Sending out waves. And then after a while, it will detect something if something gets close to you and it'll say, something detected, right? As these signals are just consistently going out. I want you to think of that like neuroception for you. Neuroception also can be called co-regulation. It really just depends on the speciality and like where you have learned a lot of your information. So From there, from neuroception, we move to experience stimulus, right? So on a trauma scale, think of in uncontrollable events like incarceration, death, domestic violence, sexual, mental, verbal abuse. Naturally, your body will move to phase three, which is that internal response, right? So your body scanning the environment in neuroception. You have now been pulled over by the police. Your body is having an internal response. And that in that phase, our bodies, depending on the situation, the event that we are enduring, we enter that gas phase or the general adaptation stage. And that's where your body is alarmed, like it's frightened, it's trying to survive. So your heart rate will increase, your respiratory rate will increase, and what is called vasoconstriction will happen. And that's where all of the blood flow is no longer in your arms and extremities. It is now focusing centrally, right? Stomach up is where, everything, all your blood is rushing to, because those are where your vital organs are. You could lose an arm and live tomorrow, but you can't lose a stomach. I know, like, that's not the term, but you know what I'm saying. All right, so in that gas phase, with all of that going on, with the heart rate and respiratory rate, obviously blood pressure, right? Your body is releasing hormones and chemicals. And like, if it continues to do this, if you continue to experience these traumatic events, your body is going to be in alarm, resistance, exhaustion. And that is where the loop can happen and happen and happen. Now, if you've only experienced one traumatic event, then you will start with neuroception, experience the stimuli, have an internal response, and then take it right back to neuroception after that calm down phase, right? So, if you endure more than two traumatic experiences, as I mentioned earlier, that could be called the cumulative harm effect, right? And so, looking at our repeated exposure page, it's mostly exhibited in a chaotic, punitive, and aggressive environment. So, if there are inconsistencies or inconsistent practices or instability, that can create a lack of trust. And when you are consistently exposed to traumatic events, especially as a child, you don't have control over these things that are happening. So now you're trying to conceptualize your environment. You're trying to conceptualize how to handle this event within your capacity. And sometimes, like, as kids, we don't think within our capacity. We just think, if I could change this, this is what I would do. All right. So that brings me, and we'll talk about some of the effects of being in repeated exposure or having that cumulative harm effect happen. But in the meantime, we can always disrupt the loop, right? So disrupting the loop includes breathing techniques or prana, guided breathing and meditation, introspective work, deeper connections with those around you, right? So please understand that professional advice, sound alchemy with Holism Haus. So, like, you have the ability to interrupt the loop. If there's ever a time you feel like you can't do it on your own, there's always professionals around, right? Dedicating time for your breath and allowing it to increase your clarity, your lung capacity, and blood flow through breathing, it ultimately allows your body to reset and rejuvenate. And sometimes breath work can look barbaric, but it is important to do it because that is how we reset our physical body and we connect with our spiritual bodies. So, introspective work is about self awareness. External validation isn't the best in this moment, in this phase, in this work, because sometimes we can only rise as high as the ecosystem we're in, meaning your friends may not be the best at their best capacity to provide any type of validation for you in this healing journey that you're on. Which leads me to the next one, right? Like having professional advice, therapists, social workers, mentors, life coaches, counselors, those are all great places to start. Resources are accessible and available. And if you need any, please feel free to reach out to me, service@holismhaus.com, and I will send you some of the resources that I have that are local to Lansing, Eaton, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, and Detroit. So deeper connections with those around you are also really good in disrupting the trauma loop because however, connecting to people, plants, animals, and nature, right? Those are the deeper connections that I'm talking about. I don't mean people as in, I want to go have intercourse with Bay because it makes me feel better, because that is not getting down to the root of the problem. That is further either adding stress onto your partner or you just really trying to get away from the true healing that needs to happen in this space. So deep connections around you means you are in a space where you can be vulnerable. You can be exactly who you are internally, deep down, that silly you, that you might even be an asshole on the inside. Who knows? You know what I mean? Because everybody is not glitter and rainbows. It is what it is. But being vulnerable with those people that you can be vulnerable with will help you disrupt that loop, because once you know your safe people, you can allow yourself to authentically be you. It creates trust in those circles of people, and breaking that trauma loop, that repeated exposure part, right? Where it says that lack of trust will keep you there. So lastly, I want to talk about sound alchemy with Holism Haus. So we truly treat everyone like family who walks into our doors. So we value our space and the people that we serve through it. So truthfully, we can also help foster the sense of community and authenticity, right? That's a part of that deeper connection part. However, we're judgment free. Frequencies and experiences we provide have been proved to be 5 out of 5 per the Google stats. Just saying. But I think that it's important for people to understand how sound can disrupt your trauma loop as well. And we'll get into that in other workshop series or other parts of this workshop series. I want to move towards the polyvagal theory. So the polyvagal theory is pretty much in that yellow box. And this is also a snippet from the workbook, but in the yellow box where it says ventral vagal complex, consider this like you just chilling, just a normal day. Everything's going fine. Nothing's bad. Nothing's good. You're just in the middle, right? It's much of what we want to be on a day-to-day basis overall. So socially bonding with people, feeling connected. We exhibit assertiveness, self-reflective, We're genuine. We set good boundaries and we have good relationships with people, right? So you're like, all right, come along. And then we have the sympathetic aggressive defense. So I like to put ventrovagal right here in the middle, right? I know it's not structured this way, but this is just how I like to visualize it. All right. So let's say you get cut off on your way to work. Your sympathetic nervous system, it's going to be here. It's your aggressive defense system. And I want you to think of earlier when we talked about like that external stimuli, as I said. So how do we show up to protect ourselves? Somebody cuts you off in traffic. What do? Right? What are some of those trauma responses that we have? Right? So somebody cut you off in traffic. You'll be aggressive, angry, controlling, name calling. You start trying to intimidate people, or you could cry. And some people even chase after the other person who cut them off, right? So just think about some of those trauma responses. What do you do when your control is being challenged, right? In the sympathetic nervous system where you're being aggressive, when you're feeling threatened. And then we're back at ventrovagal, right? So we've got our sympathetic, ventrovagal, and we've got dorsal vagal. And dorsal vagal is at the very bottom because it's like our passive defense system. And I personally visualize like people disassociating, shrinking oneself, shutting down, right? And those traits are usually people withholding their thoughts, their ideas, their feelings. They're trying to make themselves smaller, and they're shutting down emotionally and developing avoidance behavior. And personally, I have been in every last one of these complex theories, systems, whatever you want to call it, right? I have been in every last one of these phases. And I realized that I didn't like it there. I did not want to dwell in that phase of I'm consistently going to be overreactive or underreactive. I have now decided to step in and use my ventral vagal complex and be more in-depth, assertive, and self-reflective, but yet genuine with the relationships that I build now. Okay. So in the dorsal vagal complex, alongside those traits, physically, the organs in our bodies are shutting down in this phase. Think about you putting yourself so low and you are suppressing so much. What this is, suppression is the opposite of expression, right? And not being able to express yourself can lead to depression, right? So your organs are shutting down in this phase. And so again, your blood flow makes a priority for your main organs. And I want you to think about vasoconstriction here. Because where did I say that this can go earlier? In the trauma limbic loop. It was in that internal response phase, right? In that internal response phase, combined with the trauma limbic loop in the polyvagal therapy, in the polyvagal theory, this explains what we're doing and experiencing internally and externally, right? So consistently operating in the state of dysregulation causes the brain to break down proteins, stop protein synthesis, and thus break down the brain. This limits our brain's ability to scaffold, which is part of the autonomic nervous system that gives meaning to experiences. When cortisol restricts access to the impulse and control system, when cortisol restricts access to the impulse and control center, it can act as a neurotoxin. This reduces the hippocampus function, which is about reality checking and helps your fear center, your amygdala. It reduces your executive functioning and the ability to create sequential memory. So, this is why first person views of events can vary. Our reality checking is controlling the fear center. Depending on the event, it will vary. Take sexual assault, for example. The assailant will recall differently what the victim will. That is will versus survival. Two different mental states. Add the additional layer of executive functioning and the ability to not create sequential memory. Now, that event that took place could be a blur in the future or could be very vivid in the future. So, this is why it's important and imperative that you focus on yourself first. Realize how your body responds to multiple environments and the factors that contribute to the response. So if you've been following along in the workbook so far, you will see the trauma risk assessment on the next page. And this page speaks about the health risk assessments that I have compiled from my studies, my personal coaching clients, and one of my favorite online resources, which is the National Library of Medicine. Here it talks about physical, mental health risks, cognitive, social safety, and long-term developmental risk of trauma. So if you have not been nurtured through your experiences and you've reached adulthood, you are most likely to have experienced cardiovascular disease, like hypertension, chronic pain and inflammation, gastrointestinal issues, sleep disorders like insomnia, and increased risk of autoimmune disease. Those are physical health risks of trauma. The mental health risks of trauma include post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic slave disorder, anxiety and depression, substance use disorders, emotional dysregulation, and increased risk of suicide. Cognitive development includes impaired memory retention and recall, executive function deficits like planning and decision making, and poor concentration. For social risks, it is difficulty maintaining healthy relationships, social isolation, dysfunctional relationship patterns, and challenges in parenting. For your safety risks, that is an increased risk of self-harm or suicidal behavior, high-risk behaviors like substance abuse or reckless driving, vulnerability to abusive relationships or attracting them, workplace safety issues due to the lack of focus. And long-term effects for adults include chronic health conditions like diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, shortened lifespan due to stress-related illnesses, and intergenerational trauma transmission. So that means you're passing it down to your family. As I spoke about earlier, post-traumatic slave disorder. However, even though we are not slaves, classified as slaves in today's society, the behaviors, thoughts, and actions that we take in can be passed down. So this is why it's better to seek help early, because there is a way to disrupt the loop. If experienced during childhood, your likelihood of developing these conditions or diseases are higher. So with proper aid, traumatic experiences will not redefine your genetic code, but don't be afraid to ask for help. Do you have any questions so far? If so, feel free to drop it in the chat. How you feeling so far? What did you learn so far? I am listening. All right. So now that we have discussed the effects of trauma from life experiences, health risks, improvement strategies, and internal processes, we should have a pretty good understanding of what is taking place. Now that we can recognize what is happening to us internally and emotionally, we should be able to identify dysregulation as it comes up. And so that's why I want to speak to you about the importance of authenticity. It has been said, excuse me, said, not studied, that authenticity is the highest vibration. They mostly say that people who have endured a lot of trauma have a bullshit center. So if somebody's lying to you, you automatically know that that person's lying to because of the things that you've endured. Because you've went through this with someone else or another person and it was consistent or prominent enough to show up again. So um, that brings me to, as I mentioned earlier, when I said animals, people, plants, nature, right? Plants can only be plants. That plant can't be, that peony cannot be a rose. That watermelon cannot be a squash. Okay. They are authentically themselves. And the only thing that has came along to change any of that is who? Humans. Call it what? Biogenetic, bioengineer, right? So taking the chemistry of this plant, the seeds of that plant, mixing it with this, creating a hybrid plant, and just trying to see where it goes, right? You took the authenticity of this, put it together, and you created this, right? But being in environments that allow you to be your truest self are the environments that you really want to seek. And whether that is in activities, different places on the map, or taste in music, as I mentioned before, I was not allowed to authentically be myself without being labeled as someone I was not. Obviously, you could look at me and tell that I'm very much Black. However, I do have vitiligo, if you can or cannot tell. And that vitiligo had always been my excuse as to say, yeah, you can't tell I'm turning white. Yeah, I'm half Black, I'm half white. And that was my excuse. That's what made my interest in these events okay in the community, in the environments that I was in, because they wouldn't accept me any other way, right? Or I would be an outcast, for lack of better words. So, defining authenticity. So, authenticity encompasses the alignment of one's actions, values, and beliefs. It entails self awareness, honesty, and the courage to express one's true self without conforming to societal expectations. Cultivating resilience. Overcoming trauma involves recognizing and addressing deep rooted issues rather than ignoring them, rather than trying to use other things to cope through them. Acknowledging past experiences allows individuals to reclaim their narrative and transform pain into strength. Plant new seeds. You can uproot and replant. So, cultivating a true sense of self, it is crucial, very, very crucial for personal growth, for trauma recovery, for healing, however you want to say that. It involves understanding one's values and beliefs while shedding societal limitations, fostering inner strength and authenticity. So, authenticity plus resilience equals healing, right? You can't not be your true self and expect to heal because you got to understand why you're hiding these true parts of you. And if you don't have much resilience to come back and replant, then that's probably a really good area to start and focus on when you're trying to grow and heal, right? So take this time to understand some of your core values and beliefs. And I like to Google up a list of values, write down the values that align best with you. And so, one of the things that I made my own personal mission statement. Am I going to read it in this session? No. Do you want to know it? Join our groups, our troops. But in one of those, it's doing meaningful work. One of my values are doing meaningful work. I don't want to sit here and try and figure out a get rich scheme. I don't want to sit here and talk about empty ass conversations and have empty ass conversations. I don't want to do that. I want to have meaningful conversations. I want to form connections. I want to be able to do meaningful work, something that gives me purpose, that empowers me to do what I'm doing, right? So, what are yours? And if you don't know that, start with what are some things that you've heard in your family? What are some values that you've heard in your family? What did they pass along to you that has helped you develop your sense of self? What are those rooted in as far as principles? Like, do they align with you or no? Did you feel a response or a flutter in your throat or your gut when you were around someone or said something that challenged someone and you felt yourself shrink? Take note of those people, those places, what you said, what you had to say, how they reacted. Because, honey, as you grow, you have to learn what it is that is within you that makes people shrink themselves. Because someone operating in that sympathetic because you said something and now they're angry and aggressive and then you shrink, it sounds like a trauma bond. That's what it sounds like. But we've normalized so much of that. And so that other person shrinks and they never ever say what they really wanted to say to the other person ever again. And so that other person might go on in life feeling like they don't need to change and the world is going to be afraid of them and they're going to buckle down. Right? Or wrong. It is what it is. Sometimes that's how these loops play out. So, I want to talk about, I want to talk about cultivating resilience, right? Cultivating a true sense of self. As I mentioned earlier, authenticity plus resilience equals healing. So pay close attention to yourself, your thoughts, your tension in the body, and the reason why your body has responded that way, as I mentioned earlier. If you do have the workbook, there's a full body check-in on the next page. So at Holism Haus, I advise people to track and monitor if they're feeling any tightness, tension, tingling, pain, or discomfort in their body anywhere, and to mark it on the body graph and take note of like what is also on that body graph chart is like what you ate today, how you're feeling emotionally, how would you rate today, and a space for notes for you to jot down today. Like, what are some triggers? Was a date and time that you're journaling this? All of these layers will help you uncover your own patterns, even inconsistency, because that is a pattern. How long did you journal before you stopped journaling? Before you stopped checking in with your body, how long did it take? On what day, at what time did you stop doing that? Right? I am asking you to do close monitoring, consistent monitoring on yourself in this first phase. Because embracing authenticity requires intentional strategies, right? So as I mentioned, the check-ins, you would journal that. mindfulness, doing the breath work, seeking supportive communities like Holism Haus, like therapy organizations. There's so many locally in Lansing for sure. And these practices foster self discovery. They lead to a more genuine expression of yourself. Um, I like writing a song or journaling, um, because those are where I can be my most authentic self. I definitely have a hood side to me, right? Because I knew the area that I grew up in. I knew the family that I grew up in. I know the habits that they have had. And I know what I did want to take with me and what I did not. So keep track of that. Keep track of the songs that you create. Add and remove people, places, and things that are not conducive to your growth from your environment. It's sad to say, but sometimes you do have to cut people off because if I, like I mentioned earlier, if I'm around somebody and I can't authentically speak truth to you, you are telling me that either you're not trying to accept reality or the truth, or you are offended at my authenticity. And if authenticity is the highest vibration, I'd rather not sit where somebody is going to be low vibrational. That ain't me. So practice meditation, breath work, somatic stretching, which is the one that I have kind of been doing. I have not been consistent with that, but it's one that I have enjoyed. Just being able to feel some of the tension and tightness, and understanding in the way that I even hold my body and the posture that I have, how I am storing experiences. So practice that, and sound alchemy and natural and herbal remedies and concoctions to really become your best self. And I feel like those are some of the best ways, the best strategies to cultivate resilience and help you heal. All right. Affirmative action and affirmations. So, as I mentioned before, um, at the house, we all fan. So, we at Holism Haus are here to help and support you for generations to come. So, hence the other businesses that I spoke on earlier. Trauma recovery is more than just mental and emotional aspects of healing, it's about paving the way for all of our needs. If you're not familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, stay tuned with Holism Haus and we will learn a lot and grow together. And obviously, as you notice, I am not one of those, everyone come with me, breathe, life is great. I am not one of those because life is real, okay? And sometimes we're just not okay, okay? And so I am here to guide you, support you, but be authentic with you. That is what Holism Haus is about, right? Um, and so stay tuned. Connect with us. We'll grow together. We'll learn together. If you need professional assistance, we do have resources and references that we can provide to you or refer for you if needed. Or if you need immediate assistance, you can text the crisis line at 741-741 and text HOME. Either way, prioritize your safety, security, and exponential growth in the future. And we hope to provide a safe haven for you to be vulnerable, right? Because vulnerability is a gateway to authentic connections and healing. So embracing vulnerability enables individuals to express emotions, share experiences, and receive support, fostering deep relationships and growth. All right. And so we want you to experience yourself in the full beauty that you have. And I want you to see it, right? Like, what's the point of doing it if you don't see it? You gotta see it. All right. So now we talked about strategies before, which were breathing, being vulnerable, sound alchemy, introspective work. And I want to specify the importance of affirmations. So Affirmations matter because they help rewire thought patterns. With repetition, they can change the neural pathways in your brain. They counteract negativity. They're a tool to fight back against self doubt and fear. And the words are a vibration. When you speak, those vocal cords got to vibrate together. And that's why you can talk to someone with so much power in their words, and it impacts you, touches you, right? You can talk in different ways and allow people to experience what it is you're trying to say in the space that you're trying to say. So word vibrations are possible by moving of our vocal cords. They produce a vibration, and some may or may not know or believe that us speaking has the ability to life and death, right? In the tongue, it has the ability to allow us to manifest these things. I am, it is, I believe, I whatever. You know what I mean? Like you can develop some pretty good affirmations. If you need help with developing affirmations, we actually have a Vital Evox scan that takes some of like your feedback. It takes your biofeedback and it says, oh, based upon this feedback that you're giving off in this moment, these are some affirmations that Vital Evox feels will be very beneficial for you to help you reframe your neural pathway. So, for now, I feel like you should have a pretty basic foundation of trauma and how you can uproot and replant new seeds into your life. So I want you to tune in next week and we will dive into how sound alchemy aids in transmuting trauma, our subtle bodies, and how different energy forms connect and communicate with our bodies. Until later, everyone, I so appreciate you tapping and tuning in. Thank you for joining us.